We are thrilled to have you all at this installment of the Black Star Project's Public Policy and Economic Empowerment Luncheon Series. I look around the room, I see some of you have actually been in attendance for all of the luncheons throughout the series, and we greatly appreciate your continued support and your attendance today. Many of you, well, all of you are familiar with the Black Star Project and know that the work that the Black Star Project has done over the past 20 plus years now has been centered and focused around education and mentorship and trying to help and develop our youth to reach their full potential. As of this year, the turn of the year in 2018, Black Star Project has shifted our focus over to public policy and economic empowerment. We just feel like it gives an opportunity to more young people to achieve their fullest potential. We're very, very proud of the work that has been done here over the past 20 years, but we just felt like it was trying to help a few young people squeeze through the system, and we said that's not enough. It's not enough until all of our young people have an equal opportunity to become everything they were put on this earth to become, and we feel like the best way to do that is through economic empowerment and public policy. And so our presentations throughout this economic empowerment luncheon series have focused around that, so areas of entrepreneurship. We've also talked about health, we've talked about finances. Today we'll talk about law and money as well. And so all those things will be tied in together, and we greatly, greatly appreciate you. So we're gonna go ahead and start the program as you all continue to enjoy your food. I certainly hope that you all left me some. I would like to get over there and have a little bit of it. Five Loaves is phenomenal, phenomenal restaurant. So once again, thank you all for coming. We really, really appreciate your attendance today. At this time, I want to bring up our founder and chairman, Mr. Philip Jackson, for a quick welcome. Please help me welcome Mr. Philip Jackson.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hey, I thank all of you for being here today. It is so, so important. Thank you. The first thing I'd like to do is just acknowledge some of the important people in the room who have helped me and helped Black Star to accomplish whatever we've accomplished. First, Dr. Michael Foreman is here with Dr. Foreman. He's here from, he runs a system of healthcare facilities across the Chicago and suburbs, and he's been very, very, and his wife, Miss Lisa, and they've been very, very helpful to us. Mr. Marvin Paramore is here from Allstate. Mr. Paramore? Oh, there he is. Thank you. Mr. Paramore has worked to bring resources into Black Star for us to do our work. Bernard Clay is here from Introspect College Services, working with us to get hundreds, maybe thousands of young people into college. So thank you for your work. Natalie Coleman is here from the Black Police Officers Association. Natalie. And one of the projects that she's working on is capturing the history of Black police officers in Chicago from the very beginning. Miss McClellan is here from Seaway Bank. Yes. Seaway Bank was a Black-owned bank. At this point, it's not, but we still have a strong relationship with them. My mama, Dr. Grace Dawson, is here. She's one of the preeminent educators in America and taught me all that I know about education. Judge Bertina Lampkin is here today. A huge supporter of what we do, but also great friend to Mr. Montgomery here. Linda Puckett is here today. She's our lead teacher at our 50-student Saturday University. So she has managed getting 50 students on to the next level. And lastly, I just want to introduce my father, who is here today with us, Dad Burks. Dad. The thing I would like to mention before we go into our program is that I've been helping to organize a boycott of Starbucks. And people misunderstand me and the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. People have told me, leave that good white man alone. People have told me, you can't stop me from spending my money at Starbucks. People have told me, why don't you boycott jails? We are a distracted people. And so I only have one demand. One. It is for Starbucks to say, we will work at a more just America. That's it. Right now, today, Starbucks may have spent as much as $100 million fighting the boycott. They have hired everybody, PR firms, newspapers. They're dropping all kind of money, civil rights groups. They're dropping all kind of money. And now they want to do trainings where they close their stores and all I'm saying is, say we are for a more just America. And the boycott is over. They would rather spend another $100 million than do that. So, I have not been in the best of health recently, but every once in a while, my fingers can still push a computer keyboard. Okay. And when that happens, I am blessed to have connections with the world. And the world seems to be listening. At this time, I just want to thank all those from Black Star who have made this possible. In fact, there's Gloria, and she will introduce the staff. Hello. And then we will go straight to our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. I'm Gloria Smith, the Executive Director of the Black Star Project. And I'd like to introduce my staff. First, you've heard from Herb Howard. Herb is on the radio every Saturday at 6 o'clock. So I invite you to tune in to WVON and to listen to Herb. Come on, Francine. All my friends, Francine, Judge Lampkin, Mr. Montgomery, all the lawyers. We have 2 law students who are coming from DePaul. They'll be here later. They're not here yet. But going on to introduce the rest of my staff, you met Shanita outside. Shanita and Herb are a husband-wife team who helped me greatly. And in the back, we have Bettina O'Hara. Bettina is great. She's been to every forum to help with the food setup. And today we have a new young lady. Her name is Denise Ruiz. And Denise, this is Denise's first day with Black Star. So, woohoo, welcome. Okay, so thank you all. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Herb, who's going to moderate the rest of the program today. It's so good to see you all here today.
Thank you, Miss Gloria Smith. It's okay to clap for Miss Gloria. She's awesome. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about it. Won't take up too much of your time. It is our goal to get you guys out of here and on with your afternoon by about 1:15 or so. So we're going to try to get that done. With that being said, I am going to welcome our feature presenter for this afternoon. It's an absolute pleasure, first of all, to be here in your presence. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out and join us and share just a little bit of the knowledge that you have with all of us. It's now more important than ever that we not only know the law, but we understand exactly how it works and how it can affect things like our financial arena as well. So please, please, please help me in welcoming Mr. James D. Montgomery.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today because I must tell you that one of my favorite people in all the world is Mr. Jackson. I have watched him for the last 40 years, I believe, as an educator and as a pioneer in trying to get our young people equipped to face this racist society that we live in, and who has had the courage to stick to his guns throughout this period when he runs into some what I call stupid opposition sometimes for the wrong reasons. But I'm glad to be here today because I was fortunate enough after having surgery at Northwestern Hospital of getting an uninvited infection, which I'm still recovering from. But I couldn't resist an opportunity to come and share with the folks who care about some of the things that I care about. I've been practicing law in Chicago now for 61 years. I started when I was 25 years old. It was a shocking experience from the very beginning in terms of going into a profession where there were very limited employment opportunities. Certainly you could not work for corporate America. You could not work for large law firms. You basically had to almost hang out your own shingle. And sometimes that's not the best way to start out in a business. I was fortunate enough to have signed on for about $50 a week with a small firm that, thank God, gave me some early training that I truly appreciated. But what I learned over the years in terms of business and professions for those of us who are kissed by the sun, it ain't easy and the playing field is not even. On the other hand, that is not a basis upon which to sit down and throw your arms up and throw your hands up and surrender, but you've got to fight your way through the thicket and the racism that adversely affects us from the outside and from the inside. What do I mean by that? A great part of the disappointment that I've had over my 61 years, where I have fortunately been able to make a darn good living predominantly off of my own people and very rarely an opportunity to make some money outside of the black community. And I think that that's because at least I think people have felt that I have genuinely been involved in the fight for our people in every step of the way, and I think that they have rewarded me for that. But the point I want to make, though, is that I get feedback from clients. One lady said, had called me for a personal injury case, a death case, and she said a white lawyer came by her house and knocked on the door and said to her that I am here because I know you need me. And she says, no, I have an appointment with Attorney James Montgomery. And you know what he said to her? He's black, you know. No, but having said that, that is far from funny. But that goes on this very day in the city of Chicago. So that when I talk about the impediments that we have from the inside, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, that's outside. From the inside, it is that, you know, and I don't want to be a blamer or whatever, but I'm gonna tell it like I've seen it. Too many of us have what I call a mentality that comes from the days of slavery, a mentality that basically says that we're nobody and we're not really worthy, a mentality that says, and I'm going to use a phrase that some of you may not understand, that the white man's ice is colder. Yeah, anybody understand what I'm talking about now? What I'm really talking about is what Brother Jackson has told us on a regular basis, and that is that we will spend in our community our money. When I say spend in our community our money, very little of our money. If you look at and analyze where you spend your dollars, I would venture to say that you'll find that you spend over 80 to 90% of it outside of our community, and the statistics show that within a matter of 5 days, the money we spend has left our community. It's gone. Back in 1919 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they had a very successful black community that was so hated by the community that they bombed them from the sky. Those people at that time had viable businesses, whether it was transportation, whether it was profession, owned hotels, everything that people needed, they provided, and a dollar lasted in that community, turned over in the community, 35 times before it left the community, and thus enabled the community to grow and develop and be prosperous. So that I can, the collective experience that I've had tells me that A, we rely as a people on government. And theoretically, you're supposed to rely on government. You're paying taxes. But I'm saying to you as black people, when you rely upon government, you rely upon an entity that doesn't give a damn about you. You rely upon an entity that uses you from time to time because they can use your vote in order to achieve power for a certain segment of those political people. But if you analyze what you get for your vote, you will find that you need to look elsewhere for empowering yourself and not to government. Where else do we look for empowerment? I think a lot of us, all of us, unfortunately, are educated in the public schools for the most part. And if you're educated in the schools like I was, you were taught pretty much that the American dream was meant for everybody. You were taught that the American dream was that if you worked hard and really applied yourself, you could be whatever you wanted to be in this world. Well, the fact is that that's not true. The fact is that, let me give you a couple of examples. When I was in high school at Wendell Phillips, we were counseled in our senior year by a counselor. And I went to this counselor to tell her that I wanted to go to college. And the counselor told me that college was very hard. She did everything to tell me how hard college was, and of course I said, hell, you made it. So I figured I could make it too. So then I go to the University of Illinois, and they assigned a counselor for you to meet with, to plan your life. And I went into this office for this lady's name was Dr. Bild. I'll never forget her name. She was one of the most influential factors in my life. She said to me, she says, Mr. Montgomery, I have looked at your aptitude test, and you're average in this, you're average in that, you're below average in this, you're not above average in anything. Now, while your preference test suggests that you want to study the law, I find that very difficult to believe, because anybody contemplating the study of law should be above average in everything, and you're not above average in anything. I was about to give it up. I was about to give it up. I was about to allow myself to be defined by someone else whose subsequent statement let me understood that she was a racist fool. She then said to me, "So I suggest you try something less taxing, like physical education." Well, I knew damn well I was a klutz, okay? So, so I told her I would take a stab at it anyway. So I guess what I'm really saying is that too often we are swayed from our goals, and we are dissuaded from a belief that we can do whatever it is we choose to do if we apply ourselves and work hard at it. And a part of the concern that I have as a senior citizen in Chicago is watching the miseducation of our children in the public schools today, watching our kids, being murdered every day with fratricide, killing each other as if it's something that is not significant. Watching the Board of Education underfunding the schools, watching the programs in the schools shrink so that the curriculum is not a rich curriculum, and then watching those who do teach us at our schools focused mostly on discipline instead of educating our children. And now, mind you, I'm not blaming teachers, because teachers have a hell of a responsibility when it comes to teaching kids who come from, for the most part, broken homes. Broken homes are a product not of our innate way that we live. Broken homes are a result of economic deprivation by a community of people who don't have the resources to support your family, and so you end up with a family breaking up. Or you go ahead and you lose the benefits benefits, I should call it, not benefits. You use the presence of illicit drugs in our community to go ahead and engage in an illicit profession that is going to end you up in the penitentiary, and is going to end you up leaving your family, leaving the kids that you've birthed, and those kids are here for teachers to teach. Teachers to teach, and a mother or a grandmother or an aunt who has to go out and work and make a living to make sure that they can feed those kids. Well, who is it that is left to raise the kids? Their peers. And that's how we end up with our gangs being so prolific throughout all of our communities. And these gangs are kids teaching kids, and kids kids not learning how it is to become a man or a productive citizen, because that's not a part of the education that they get on the street. Having said all of that, I could probably talk for the next 25, 30 minutes, but I would like very much to hear any questions that anybody might have, because that would give me some inspiration for thinking.
Any questions?
All right.
Judge?
I'd like to know, Jim, what do you think that we can do? I was in the trial court of the 26th in California for 18 years, and I would say if I saw 500 young people in front of me, I may have seen 15 or 20 mothers, but I didn't see 5 fathers out of 500 children. And to me, that is so much a part of why we are where we are now. How are we going to turn this around? And I have only one suggestion. I have to say it. I think decent people like all of you here ought to be becoming foster parents to help children, because my experience is that the foster parents who take the children are usually people who need money themselves for their children, and they really don't nurture the children that they foster.
See, I have a simple solution for our problems, and I think that simple solution says that we've got to help ourselves and not look to others to help us, not look for government to help us. And one way of doing that is represented here today when we spent our money on the food here with a person of color. If you need to spend your money where you live. And, most of you are old enough to remember the days when we had viable banks, insurance companies, mom and pop stores on every corner, where we would patronize the folks in our community, and our community was able to prosper. And now we have all of that as dried up and gone. And a part of it is people don't look let me back up. A part of that is that we are convinced that the white man's ice is colder. When we were discriminated against in terms of you couldn't go into this store and shop, or you couldn't buy insurance from New York Life Insurance Company, you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that. Well, we had no choice but to buy black. And when the white man realized that the dollar was green and decided that black dollars were also green, I think that at that point we flocked right over to that welcome sign, and we've been flocking over there ever since. And to the extent that you spend your money outside of your community, you build the other community and you tear yours down. Okay? That's all I can say.
Next question, sir.
Hey, how you doing, Mr. Montgomery? Don Russell, report. I wanted your take on to what degree do you feel that media and access to media and content using technology today is affecting our community, and what solutions do you think would, as far as a parent or community, we need to take as far as getting away from the content that our kids are digesting and acting out, reenacting?
I think communication is good. I think that the problem that we have is that structurally we educate our children through public schools. Structurally, our kids watch television, which is owned and operated by the people who control the world, and whose content of their TV and radio is a content that they choose, that we are subjected to. One of the very successful businessmen recently wrote a book called Brainwashed, I think he called it. And he sort of talked about how the media is an instrument of white supremacy. It's an instrument of defining who you are, it tries to define you, is what it amounts to. And so I have grave misgivings about the value of the media in terms of the black liberation. I have great, we don't own the means of communication. I mean, rarely do you see a media that is, where the content is oriented to those interests that are our interests. We look at media that is oriented toward the interests of those who control corporate America, those who control the media, those who control all of the means of production in this country. So that I said to some young man the other day, and I said it to him reluctantly, and I said to him when he asked, "What can I do to make things better in our community. And I said, you know, I hate to say this to you, but I'm going to say it. Fortunately, Judge Cousins was in the room, and he kind of counteracted something I said. I said to him, I says, there's no hope. And Bill Cousins says, there is hope. But if you really sit down and analyze what it is that we can do within our own power, and that is we can determine where we spend our dollars. We're in a capitalistic society where the dollar speaks louder than words sometimes. And until such time as we can get access to capital, we can't build businesses. The few black banks that existed in this community are gone. Whenever the recession hit, the banks went, Whenever the recession hit, at least 3 banks went under. Seaway, Highland, and I think there was another one on the west side. Lawndale, yes. So that those were banks that served in the black community. Those were the few banks that you could go to and get a loan. And some of those you couldn't get a loan from because they have to operate on the same basis of any other bank to make sure that you have sound credit. Otherwise, they can't lend you any money. But to the extent that we did lend money to the businesses in our community, when the businesses failed, the banks failed. And so, having said that, I'm ready for a different question. You should ask yourself that question about the media. Don't ask me.
First question, then we'll go here and in the back.
Jim, I think that many people in the black community would look at those of us, particularly in the legal profession, and say, what have you done for us lately? Or what should you be doing for us?
Right.
How do you respond?
Well, 2 things. One, there is no avenue to justice except through the law. And if our folks, and I'm talking about you and me and everybody in our profession, don't spend some pro bono time helping in our community, we don't deserve to get the support of our community. And I must tell you that I have really thrived in our community because in my early years I was known as a good cheap lawyer. And if you had a cause and you could give me a story, I would end up representing you for whatever you had, if anything. So yeah, the answer is that we need to support the community. We can't go around looking for the community to support us when we don't support the community. And even the whole notion about businesses. I mean, we need to be the people who drive folks into structuring their businesses so that they can be successful.
Next question.
So my name is Dr. Mickey Foreman. I've started working recently with Philip and the Black Star Project because I started in 1991 in medicine at Jackson Park Hospital, and over the 25-some years, I have not seen any significant improvement in the community there. I also have other medical centers in underprivileged communities, and I personally have a desire to try to see development and improve the communities. I would like to know, as a non-black business owner, what can I do and how can I get other non-minority business owners to support and invest back in the community, specific actions. Mm-hmm. And so I would like to hear input from anybody after the meeting in your particular area.
Well, I don't know if I'm the right person to ask that question, but obviously There are people who have been very proactively involved in trying to better the conditions of African American people. And we don't have to go far to find some of them. And I think that sometimes the road is obvious, but at other times, you get resistance when you do that sometimes. Sometimes you get people racism is alive and well in America and all over the world, not just in America. And I don't care if you're talking about Africa or India or wherever it is. Every place in this world that I have had the privilege of going to, racism is there. And I think that a part of what we have to do, again, is to focus on what we can do for us. Focus on how we can get rid of and shake off this this mentality, this slave mentality. My mother, I walked into my living room one day and my mother was having a conversation with my aunt, and she said, "I'll never hire another black lawyer as long as I live." I said, "Mother, I'm going to law school. I'm not talking about you, boy." But that kind of talk, that kind of talk is talking down all because of maybe the misdeeds of one. So that that mentality, I don't think anybody means any harm when mothers and grandmothers and aunts carry that on from generation to generation, but it happens, and we got to face it and fight it.
Yeah, lady in the back.
Really quick, I just want to let you guys know there is hope. I'm a millennial. Majority of our dollars go, my boyfriend and I, his daughter, she goes to Freedom Home Academy. It's a private school on 75th, I think, and it's based in African culture. I mean, the school is like super excellent. Like, she can speak in French and Spanish, and the musical instruments they teach the kids, like she started at the age of 5. It's only been a year, but her reading skills are improving substantially, and we pay for it, and it's money that comes out of our pocket, and it's very difficult right now, but he's like, "Listen, this is an investment, I have to invest in this," and so I'm okay with that. Many of our dollars go, like our landlord, she's black, my uncle owns Pillar Insurance on 43rd, like our insurance money goes there. Our jewelry store, Ford Jewelers on Jewelers Road, they are black there, so many of our dollars go to our community, and we pride ourselves on that. I'm a third-year law student. I graduate next month from DePaul. So I came here because I saw that, Mr. Montgomery, you were going to speak, and my mentor, Herschella Conyers from UFC, she's been telling me about you because my interests are criminal law and civil rights. And right now it's difficult. I'm from Inglewood, and I'm having a tough time. I haven't found a job yet right now, but I know I will. So, but I have this battle with giving back and helping my community and going back to Inglewood and making sure they are good there. But I have to get myself together. And then so I just want to know if you have any advice for a third-year law student. I interned with Logie and Logie. I did some things with them before. So my interest is civil rights. And I just want to know if you can give me some advice, some encouragement, something for me to keep going as a third-year law student, and something for me to look forward to in the future.
So let me talk to you about two things. One, the criminal law as a way of making a living is just that. I spent maybe 30 years doing predominantly criminal practice. and I loved it. It was like food to eat and kicking butt in the courtroom and stuff like that. But when it was all said and done, I had a hell of a time sending my kids through college, because there's the folks who find themselves in the criminal courts generally can't afford to be represented appropriately, and so that you have to represent them for what they have. So my suggestion to you, and I commend you for having had an opportunity to work with Lovey and Lovey, because that's the area where you can get into the business and really and truly make a darn good living. Most of the people who are deprived of their freedom wrongly in this state are black people. And you read the paper every day, and you watched it at Lovey and Lovey, where they were getting verdicts and settlements of $15 and $10 million. And that's really the avenue that I chose, where I could make a living and really support my family and give back to the community. Because if you can't make any money, you can't give back to the community any dollars. So that my suggestion would be that would be the avenue to go to. I would suggest, however, that if you get an opportunity to get into the criminal field, just get in there so that you can learn how to try cases, because it is the quickest and most effective way of learning how to try cases. Okay?
Thank you. Brother Clay, and then the gentleman to your right.
Yeah, I want to put one of my staff members on the spot, because he'll be entering law school this fall. And what advice would you give to an African-American male that's entering law school this fall? And it's a young man standing back there with his beard. He graduated from North. But what advice would you give him?
Well, when I was a brand new lawyer, I went to see an old man who was a criminal lawyer and one of the best in the business. And I told him that I was getting out of law school, and I had heard about him, and I would love to go to work for him. His name was Joe Clayton. And Joe, at that stage of his life, was probably working day and night. He was a hard worker and a hard preparer. So I saw him, and my appointment was at night in his office while he was practicing law. At night, I met him. He finally saw me about 9 o'clock. And he said to me what I'll say to the young man: the law business is not a place where you're going to get rich quick. Secondly, he says, you've got to work hard. Thirdly, he says, if you have a dance to go to on Saturday night and I have a brief for you to write, you're writing the brief. So, it's like anything else. You really got to apply yourself so that you can be better than the next man you stand up against in the courthouse. And that's critically important. When I started out in the practice, judges disrespected black lawyers on a regular basis. I mean, I stood up in the court the first time I went to court with my boss in a case that they had, and this judge said something demeaning to them, and they said nothing. And I said, I didn't get to go to law school to be treated like an inn, and I'm not going to take that. So the first one that disrespected me, I said to him, I says, pardon me, Your Honor, did I hear you correctly? And he backed off like I was the plague. And of course the word got around and said, leave this fool alone. This nigga's crazy.
Trying to solicit some type of help, some type of understanding. I worked at the Juvenile Detention Center for 30 years. I retired in December. I've made the rest of my life's work putting that institution on the map from this day forward. That's why I came here. I don't represent any organization. I'm just a citizen who live in the black community, who actually raised his son by himself. My son is 26 and actually got a degree in finance, and now he's trying to do the markets, and he's really into finance, really strong. I say this to you to say this. As I understand it, you were a part of the steering committee for the Juvenile Detention Center. And what we needed as prosecutors to deal with people like the ACLU and Mr. Benjamin Wolf, who was the attorney who filed the lawsuit against the Juvenile Detention Center in 1999. Mr. Benjamin Wolf garnered a check that was worth $370,000 for filing that lawsuit. We didn't have any black attorneys to fight or to battle against that whole paradigm. So as a result, the whole institution was turned upside down, inside out, as you're well aware of. The doors are made to look like jail doors now, in which they were glass. The tables are bolted down as if it's a prison, in which they used to be one where we could move around and it was a family. The kids are walking around the building on the inside now with shackles on their wrists. When in times past, it was abhorrent for them to put on shackles. Having said that, I would like to know, because I didn't get a response from my letter before, I would just like to know if I could just garner understanding from you on a personal level about how you understand the inside of the Juvenile Detention Center as you understand it, relative to you being a part of the steering committee.
So, I can say that everything that you say about the ACLU and the lawsuit they filed, and what it meant in terms of the financial constraints that were placed on the Juvenile Detention Center, I agree with all of that. Now, the bottom line is, who defends the elected officials, and who defends the courts? It's the chief judge who runs the courts, right? And the chief judge hires whatever lawyers are involved in defending those folks, right? And I'm sure they hired lawyers to represent the interests of the Juvenile Detention Center during the course of that litigation.
At that particular time, we got to move on. Not in charge of substitution. Stop.
I agree. Yeah, you're right.
If you gentlemen would like to continue this conversation after, you're more than welcome. We have time for 2 more questions. Hugh?
I wanted to ask you, so I heard you talk about when you were young, being dissuaded by admissions counselors and being disrespected by judges. And I heard you talk about, in the black community, not only keeping the black dollars in the community, but helping yourself. Mm-hmm. And I guess I want to know, what do you attribute your ability to stand up and persevere against that dissuasion? And what would you suggest in terms of how that attribute can be imparted to children in a practical way to make them believe in themselves the way you obviously believed in yourself? Because I think that's what you're kind of getting at, but where does that come from and how do you pass that along?
I think that 2 things. Education in the public schools and in the universities that I went to brainwashed me as much as it did anybody else. I was probably late 30s or early 40s before I became aware of who I was as a person in the world and of my value and of my self-worth and all of that. And I had to read and study about the history of racism throughout the world and to get an understanding of what the forces were and to develop means of fighting them. And that's what I spent my time doing, fighting the system. Even as a criminal defense lawyer, my job was to fight a system that was loaded against the defendants, loaded against black people, a system that was largely controlled at that time by the Democratic Central Committee, who put all the judges in place. And sometimes you got judges who would serve the party and not necessarily justice. So a part of what I did was to fight that. And it took me a while to understand, why I was doing what I was doing. And I would say that the answer is a part of what the young lady who is in her third year of law school said. The kids that the school that she's referring to are learning from an Afrocentric perspective who they are. I had no idea about who I was as a young man. I thought Africans were a bunch of dummies, grunting and carrying on and lauding Tarzan and Jane. I mean, I didn't want to associate with Africans. But again, that's a part of my education through university, law school, public high school, public grammar school. That's the education I got. Columbus discovered America. Give me a break.
We have time for just one more question, sir.
This kind of falls into what you guys were just talking about. Lately, I've been doing a lot of studying. I was a kid, grew up on the west side of Chicago. Went through being a knucklehead, undesirable kid to now going off to college and having owning my own business in technology. And I've been studying about correcting your status. And I've been really wanting to ask, the judges and maybe someone with your experience, what do you feel about someone correcting their status? And what I mean by that is, I used to get a ticket and I would call a lawyer to deal with that. Then I read about the UCC code 1-308, where you don't have to consent to a contract with the courts. I read about, understanding the laws of subrogation, where you can use the bond to cover certain things. And I've exercised those things, and they've actually worked. I mean, my company has been under attack from people who fire, other companies want things out of us, and then we send them back. We do not consent to contract with the courts, and that stuff has worked. So what I'm wondering is, I know that doesn't benefit the legal institution and the legal business to say, listen, everybody should study that approach. But if a young black man like myself gets pulled over, and I can simply write, I do not agree to contract with the courts, state UCC 1-308, all rights reserved, and that gets me out of that ticket, why is that not being taught more?
Well, I'm glad you taught me about that one, because I don't know anything about it.
It works. It works.
Okay.
Thank you so much, James D. Montgomery, everybody. At this time, I want to bring back our executive director, Ms. Gloria Smith. She has some gifts for Mr. Montgomery and some closing remarks for you all as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery, for your words. I want to thank you again for being here today. Just very quickly, we have some gifts, and Philip made some acknowledgments, and I just want to acknowledge all of our Black Star members. So if you're a member, just wave, woo, all your members. Thank you. Thank you for your support. A couple of people in the room I forgot to acknowledge. We have some volunteers. Steve and Loretta Bradford. Steve is wearing an Educator Die shirt, so we're also giving you one of our Educator Die shirt. And this is from the bank. They wanted you to have that. Again, thank you all for being here today. Lillian, thank you. All of Bob, all of my members.
I want to thank you guys again for coming to the Economic Empowerment Luncheon Series. I want to let you guys know that the next one will be coming up on May 16th. It is Wednesday, May 16th. The featured presenter for that day will be John Rogers. John Rogers is the chairman and executive officer at Ariel Investments, and he's going to be speaking on building generational wealth. Generational wealth that can be passed down to your children's children and so forth. So that'll be this May 16th. This Wednesday, you guys can RSVP for that today, or you can call into the office and RSVP at a later time. Mr. Jackson?
Yeah. Well, once again, I want to thank everybody for coming, and just to make just a couple of quick announcements. We're going to, with Mr. Montgomery's permission, we pay an honorarium to a not-for-profit after each session. instead of paying an honorarium for a not-for-profit, we would like to take those proceeds and invest them in Mr. Montgomery's books for prisoners who write the Black Star Project from all over the country, from Attica, from Pelican Bay, from downstate Illinois. So we will send your books out. Will everyone please take down this email address? C F U S C O at Sun Times, one word, SUNTIMES.com. That is the executive editor of the Chicago Sun-Times. I asked them to print a letter in response to a column they put out. And they were bad enough to put out the column. They refused to put out a balanced, even-handed response. If you, I don't know if you will, but if you were willing to ask, so many people are saying, well, what we going to do, you got to ask somebody. And then they may do it or they may not do it. But if you're not even willing to ask, it will never be done. Once again, the email is CFUSCO at suntimes.com. Last time, CFUSCO at suntimes.com. We won't even do that. I mean, I don't know how much that's going to cost anybody, but the last thing for me, or two, one, all things economic. Black Star has transitioned from being possibly the best tutoring, mentoring, parent development agency in the city of Chicago and maybe the Midwest. We're through with that. Now it is all things economic. I can't find people who are interested in anything economic. I can't find them. You're passing out this coffee shop thing. I wanted to get these coffee shops. I'm doing the boycott with Starbucks. And I told them, I said, you guys can never go up against the Starbucks unorganized. So let us organize out. You know, I've got a little bit here. And we will knock them dead. But they won't even return my calls. So the very last thing, I'm scheduled to be on a radio show in an hour, I think. WCPT, Progressive Talk Radio. They want to talk about the boycott, and they want to talk about the mayoral's race. So if it's 8:20 a.m. on the AM dial, Ben Jarafsky is the moderator. So that's it for me.